In 1962, after I returned from living in Mexico, I brought back with me a fascination with light and color. My traditional works, inspired by my love of dancing, would give way to numerous explorations. Life cycle is what I call this piece. It was interesting because it just came to me as the way it is. This is one of my concepts that just sort of full-blown came to mind to do. I have the men in the circle on the bottom and the women are standing on their shoulders. I was intending to put children on the women's shoulders, but I thought that was really going to be redundant. It seemed to work just at this point. Of course, I also do occasionally larger than life-size busts of people who I find very inspiring, like Rudolf Nureyev, who is, to me, one of the most exciting dancers. Another very exciting person to me is Zubin Mehta. I remember going to the symphony and primarily to hear the music, but I started observing the expressions on the face of Mehta, and I found them so fabulously exciting that I would go to the concert after that intent on watching the maestro. Then I went into free-form things. I like to capture an organic feeling and motion, and just do things with the resin that I had never seen done before. This piece was inspired by the moon dust. The optical illusions that I enjoyed playing with in the lenses that I cast fascinated me, because you could pick up a reflection of something inside itself that would project into a space that wasn't there. One piece I did is called Luna, that was really very round. It was much rounder than this, and the surface of the moon was built up on the inside. It was really, to me, again, this feeling of taking something that is solid and making it transparent or translucent and adding a dimension to it that's like reality. Then I started putting the two lenses together, making a sphere. But to put them together, I would use a gel to catch pockets of air, and these, of course, would catch light and reflections. And then I would also add pigment, because the edges weren't sealed yet, and I would build up designs in the inside of this spheroid. When they're moved and played with in the light, I think they're rather cosmic. At least that's what I was thinking of when I was putting them together. Getting back to the fiberglass and resin and freeform things that I enjoy doing, I think one of the more successful pieces was this, and I call it waterfall. It was done with sheets of fiberglass that I cut into a rather freeform pattern, ragged edge, And then the fiberglass was hung over rope. Then the resin was applied to the fiberglass. I had to put in little rods to separate the sheets so they wouldn't cling together and become one sheet. And this was all fairly tedious, but I liked the result. Then the second stage was adding texture. I took the resin in its gel state, which is a matter of, it lasts just a few minutes, and applied it to the sheets. And fortunately, some of it did stay on the sheets. Most of it ended up on the floor, but I did get to build up a texture on this that does things with the light and makes it more organic feeling, I believe. These drops are the largest castings that I did. Each one took 13 gallons of resin, and they weigh about 135 pounds apiece. I was quite fortunate in the setting up of these pieces because they came out without cracks, without flaws, and the initial work on them really was 4 hours, I think it took, to mix the resin and pour into latex molds. But after that, it took, seems like months. It was probably a couple of weeks of polishing and finishing, getting rid of the seam marks. So after doing these large pieces, I decided that I would go back to smaller forms and lighter forms, because these really took away my independence. I couldn't move them by myself. It meant I had to have help. And as an artist, I really like to feel independent completely and be able to do my work without the assistance or the need of an assistant. Another medium I find very exciting to experiment with is mylar. It's a beautiful, beautiful substance, but it has a definite character of its own, and you really have to let it do its own thing. It has quite a character. As I watched it, I became utterly fascinated because it reminded me of mercury, water, reflections, and light, everything that you find at the seashore. So I thought, wouldn't this be an interesting experience to take the mylar to the beach and have it become involved with the wind and the water and pick up the reflections of nature to make it rather an organic expression with something that, of course, doesn't look organic at all. It's part of our science to turn out such a beautiful piece of plastic that looks so fabulous. But taking it out and letting the wind play with it and the sunlight reflect on it, I started to get ideas of an environmental piece that I wanted to do in my studio. I wanted the whole thing to be the essence of the ocean. There would be reflection, light, motion, and these were the things that I did apply to the mylar in my studio to make an environment that is very, very watery. Of course, I also did the sculpture experiment again here with the rocks, because I thought these mylar sculptures are going to pick up the reflections of the sky and the water. Taking the ideas back to the studio, I put together the environment that to me had all of the essences of the ocean. Of course, it meant building scaffolding, getting motors. I had a 1/4 horsepower motor on each wall, moving a beam from which the mylar was suspended. And the beams moved about 4 inches, I shouldn't say about exactly, 4 inches back and forth. And this, in turn, made the mylar undulate. After getting the motion controlled the way I felt I wanted it to work, I had many problems, because at first I thought I would glue the mylar together, make the sheets all of one piece, but that didn't work. I was going to weight them at the bottom. I did quite a few experiments. But as I say, mylar has its own character, and I think the more you can let it do its own thing, the better it behaves. When it was finished, it really had a fabulous feeling to it. It was really like being underwater. You wanted to swim. You felt like you should defy gravity. Actually, I feel sort of like a mermaid. I thought it would be an interesting experiment to bring some of my neon sculptures into the room, just to see what happens when the light bounces around and almost into an infinity. I had this overhead light, the room light, cut down, and these pieces, as they flickered and blinked, were really an eerie feeling. You were even deeper in the depths of an ocean, some sort of science fiction ocean, I think. But the colors bounced and traveled, and it, to me, was a rather fascinating feeling to be in such a strange environment. I call the neon sculptures perspections because there's a perspective in them, and then there are reflections that are rather interesting, I feel, because unless you do put your hand into the space, you're not sure of the distances involved. It's rather another optical illusion. A lot of my work is playing with illusion. This is my colors encomium, an environment with sounds for colors. The participant walking through the spectrum activates the corresponding musical tape. The participant is standing here in the orange space, playing both the red and the yellow tapes. Here is the mylar floor, which also moves as the participant walks across it, casting reflections on the wall. And across the room is a mylar panel to reflect the whole spectrum, and there is some of the blue, which is what we're playing now. This is the entrance to color spaces, 6 cubicles of additive colors of the spectrum, reflected on white canvas walls and mylar floor. This shows a canvas curtain leading to the yellow space from the green. The viewer is immersed in pure colored light. fascination for light, I became very aware of the laser and the work that was being done with it. But I said, well, I'm not a scientist. You know, this seems to be very difficult thing to work with. But it turned out that it's not so. There are quite a few artists that are interested in using lasers to make holograms, which is a three-dimensional image captured on a plate. So I'm using laser as one of the latest developments in my capturing light as an art form. This is light in space number 1. The forms 7 feet high are lit by a laser beam with a moving filter, creating motion on its surface. Light in space 2 has 6 delicate plastic curtains, always in motion. The laser beam reflects and travels through them to the wall, 18 feet away, where it is reflected back from a tiny oblong mirror and remarkably holds its shape. This is the first of my Holodian series. I call it Space Graffiti Whipped Cream. It was a new place to create a performance. Here I am, flying as Daughter of Icarus, which followed Space Graffiti in 1972 and 73. These were the first of 7 360 integral holograms, which I named Holodian series. A variation on my performance is 3 objects. Each one is different in color, and it's also in its neighbor's space. This is Tired Liberty, done in 1975 for the bicentennial celebration. Little did I realize how really tired she was. These are 2 8x10 reflection holograms of the floating square, and the upper one is the projecting sphere. I was using reflective subjects to get lots of color, and manipulating the emulsion on the sphere gave me a painterly surface as ground that I liked very much. There is a mystery in the projecting images, but I also wanted the holographic images themselves to be mysterious and unreal. This is the sphere in collage done in 1975 and in the collection of the Museum of Holography in New York. I was exploring the use of the hologram as mixed media, combining it with other art materials such as graph paper and gels. Another area I wanted to work with was the kinetic effect of projecting images against the virtual images. As you can see here, if you move your head back and forth, the center panel seems quite static. That's the virtual. But the ones projecting in space have their own life. Here also is an example of the virtual images as a ground for the pseudoscopic images. This is called detail for a bas-relief 2. The bas-relief is a possible detail for a very large wall. This is Bars and Collage. It's an 8x10 hologram that I did around 1977. In this instance, the image is virtual because I felt that the brown paper gave enough of a motion in the different plane, and it also looked transparent. These are 2 8x10 holograms. This is the large egg, and it's a projecting image, pseudoscopic. The upper one is 6D egg, and it has two exposures in it, the virtual in back playing against the floating one in the front. Here I used collage as a traditional definition for depth. To change from simple geometric forms and add a human element, I created space face. This is 8 by 10 inches. Here I drew additional lines on the brown paper background to play against the lines painted on the face. This is Wall Piece Red Shift, my second largest work, and a mural 24 feet long. It was installed in the Santa Barbara Museum's artist space in 1980. The center triptych was pseudoscopic and of reddish hue, with the lines projecting about 3 inches in space. As the holograms progressed to either end of the panel, they went deeper and cooler in color, the last ones being the deepest and greenest. This slide is of one of the subjects from my nighttime beach installation of transmission holograms, Winter Solstice, 1979. The lighting was mercury vapor beach lights, and I liked the 3D color separations it gave. 3 subjects were organic and played against realities, like this feather projected into the rocks. 3 cosmic subjects were pseudoscopic with dark shadow behind them. From my solstice piece in 1979, one of the cosmic subjects was an aurora. I loved the subtle colors, the apricot and turquoise, so in 1980 at the Museum of Holography's Artist in Residence, I did a new aurora master transmission. My idea was to make a very large changing color field, this time using gallery lights. My wood floor period was called such because when I moved from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara and also working in Soho, my studio happened to be on wood floors. And as any holographer knows, it's near impossible to have a vibration-free environment. So consequently, I was doing a lot of Polaroid work because I could go to my Polaroid when I couldn't do my holography. Most of the work done was reflection, and reflection is even much more difficult to shoot when you have vibration problems. I was almost ready to give up holography when I came back to Santa Barbara, but I was very fortunate after a year of looking to find a cement floor and really take off once again. Now in 1987, and again using a pulse laser, I'm exploring new dimensions. This is a continuation of the Ruby Reflection series, an 8 by 10 self-portrait rendered as a virtual image. holography laser that I got in 1986, 85, 86, which took away all of my vibration problems and let me do textures of delicate things. And I can introduce you to the size. This is the power supply. This is where we turn it on. The water cooler I had to take out, the water circulator, and actually add a cooler because here in Santa Barbara the water is very warm. And this being made in the colder climate of England and Canada, I had a bit of a problem. What I do, I'll just give you a quick little introduction. I have to have a continuous wave helium neon to set up my subjects and my angles, all of that, because this pulse is so instantaneous that you can't judge where it's going to be or how it's going to get there. So I turn on the little guide helium neon, which comes out here and goes through a lens. There's all my boards. What I wanted to show you, all on this piece of paper, we have so much light here.
It's
I don't know
visible.
if you'll pick this up. This
Sure.
is the little helium neon light, which helps me light the subject I'm going to shoot. Usually, this is a lens. I usually have a mirror here, goes to mirror overhead, which I can adjust to the subject over there. And sometimes I work vertical subjects, sometimes horizontal subjects. Now what I do is when I think that the current is building up enough, I will turn the laser on. And when it is ready to fire, this little, you can hear it running madly, it will start to blink. And at that point in time, if the camera wants to point down at the white wall, Al, you want to point down, on the wall, I think you'll see it the most. I'll count 1, 2, 3. After the exposure of the film, I take it to the dark room, and this is all done with the green safety line. And here in the dark room, I have a ventilator system, Mickey Mouse, but it works. And I have to make my own chemicals. They don't really have the right ready-made chemicals for this process. So it involves the warm water and the measuring of the chemicals and mixing. And then after the developing and rinsing and bleaching and rinsing, you come over here and you squeegee the film or the plate. And after that, if you're sure you have all the little drops off, because they leave horrendous little marks in your hologram, you use a dryer. I use a regular hair dryer, medium, and dry the plate. It's black. You don't see a thing on it. And the most exciting thing, though, is as it starts to dry, something starts to show, like in a photograph. But in this case, you're dealing with space, and it'll be dark, and then all of a sudden, as it dries, you will see your hologram live, coming to life in there. And it's just an exciting work to do. This is where I put work up under proper lighting after the dark room to do compositions, check things out, see the boo-boos. And I have a marvelous example for you here that I'll put a black card behind it because you see this. This was a film hologram done with a continuous wave laser. I will show you the wood floor period problems. That shadows there are due to motion. And they just don't let the coherent waves meet coherently. They nullify each other. Consequently, you get these little blank places in the hologram. Some of the other series that I was doing were the satin pieces. And this one, which I'm just going to reframe again, 2 holograms of satin, and they're pseudoscopic. Now, if I can show you where the shadow is, it's actually out here. And then I put my hand back there. It's 2 holograms developed different times, gives you different color. That's one of the ways of controlling color in your holograms. And I could show you many, many, many works that did not end up hanging on the wall. For instance, when I was doing the water lilies, which were double exposures, color was very important. And this is very red, as you see. It's beautiful. There's the lily. These are tiny little these little babies that I've been using in my work since the 70s. Little beautiful, made in Germany. These little tiny baby dolls, and color-wise, wrong. You know, it's a beautiful piece, but it didn't go in with the murals. Here is the installation of the water lilies after Monet or Slow Death, because I did double exposures with the beautiful water surface projecting in front, but when you look in the second exposure in the dark depths, you'll see beer cans, dead fish, and a little bit of present-day detritus. The images float because the film is suspended in air, and I use a little electric fan to keep them moving. They also cast a beautiful reflection on the floor that looks like water ripples, and I made a sound for this which is reminiscent of a waterfall in the distance, a little crickets chirping, and then there is a bit of Gregorian chant that comes in. This was all done in 80. I started this and finished it in about 88, 89. And it was installed at the Durand Art Institute. And here in my studio I have a bit of the aurora. And on the right wall is the larger piece I did. 4 panels. I call it blah, 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 because you can see the subject is words in different languages, and it projects about 4 inches in front of the plane, and to establish that, I put some letters right on, or the arrow you see there, right on the surface, and as you walk by, you realize the depth of the work. Here I am at the Royal College of Art in London with my exhibition. On the right wall, you see the colors reflecting from 3 holograms in space, and next to me on the pedestal is a sculpture. It's called the wire box. The 5 sides have my wire pattern, and if you look closely, you'll see me inside there with a tape. Here are the Polaroid series, the holopolar. This is pure Polaroid at the beginning, and this is light waves, shot outdoors with sunlight on a black ground. And this led me to continue to utilize holography with the Polaroid. Here you see projecting Polaroid. The laser image, the hologram, is behind. It makes the Polaroid appear to project a bit off of the plane. Here's a transfer, a Polaroid glued, peeled and glued to the back of the emulsion. You can see the image faintly of the wire subject in the Polaroid played against the screen. This is a larger transfer of the same screens, also applied to a hologram, and the subject of the hologram is the same screen. And it's a 10 by 10 inch. I wanted to include some works by a Ukrainian Georgian immigrant who's a relative of mine. They were done in 1991 as a celebration for the fall of the Berlin Wall. And they actually showed me my roots to reflection holography, because the reflection holography was developed in the Soviet Union in the 60s. And also, when I looked back at the pre-revolutionary artists, especially the Rayonists, Goncharova and Larionov, they were trying to capture light in space with paint. Where was the laser? they were ahead of their time, but I feel that that was that, oh, what shall I say, intuitive feeling of trying to get beyond the flat plane by looking at light that they couldn't even see.
Krugi и квадраты, circles and squares. Плавающая плоскость, floating plane after Kamensky. K after Malevich. Dama в зеркале, lady in the mirror after Osmerkin. Цвета, colors. Слово, word after Malevich. Выступающий квадрат, projecting square after Malevich. Cube, cube. Зеленые круги, green circles after Rodchenko. Голубой квадрат, blue square. Напоминание, mementos. Картина, painting, after Rozanova. Spectra, spectra, after Puni. Двойные квадраты, double squares. Malatok, hammer, after Puni.